Hello, welcome again to day 3. And we are going to jump right in to integrative medicine approaches to brain health, to decreasing inflammation, to just improving overall well-being. I know as folks like myself who are dealing with chronic concerns, whether it be Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility like me, or being a cancer survivor, moving towards being a thriver, long COVID of I'm thyroid, bipolar, depression, anxiety, all the things. There's a commonality in that inflammation does play a part. Brain health is a big part of things. It's not just something that psychiatrists and neurologists care about. It's a big part of our well-being, our overall ability to feel well, even if we have a chronic diagnosis. It is possible to still feel well, even when our body has a different way of being that maybe doesn't always align with how we want to conduct ourselves. So these kind of skills and information and actions that we can take, again, we are like Dorothy with the ruby slippers, and I'm hopefully acting like Glenda more than the Wicked Witch and telling you some advice that you can use. These are things that we can do today to start moving towards a place of wellness, moving towards a place of being our best selves. And, with the mad skills we learned yesterday, talking to our healthcare providers about different ways of approaching things. Okay. And of course, as always, if that doesn't serve you, you can schedule a discovery call with me and I can partner with you to do that because I have the ability to partner with folks worldwide and I'm happy to align with you as you're navigating that. I can work with you and your doctor, whatever kind of serves you and your needs the best. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and get started. All right. So, as I said, today we're going to talk about improving brain health. Really, it's overall health, but brain health is one niche that I'm kind of focusing on to keep us in focus. But this really does translate into pain, into overall well-being and management. So these are going to be integrative approaches to healing the mind. So just a review, we talked about this on the first day, the stress response. So remember, stress response, something happens to us, we are giving a talk, we're dealing with, Mercury in retrograde and like whatever, Zoom or whatever else not working well. We're dealing with an argument between ourselves and a loved one, a medical provider who doesn't quite hear us and fulfill the needs that we have, or just a symptom that we're dealing with and trying to face and move through. So the stress happens and the brain notices the stress. This is all lower brain. So it's not even like necessarily a cognitive recognition. It's more subconscious. The brain commands the adrenal gland. Those are those glands that they're yellow here. They are just above the kidneys and they control the stress hormone. So the adrenal uses stress hormones like cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine to speak to the body, to tell the body, dude, we got to get prepared for dealing with this stress, dealing with this change in environment. And what does the body do? The body prepares as if it needs to run or fight. That's why we call it fight or flight. And that means increasing sugar in the blood. The sugar is increased to feed your muscles so you're able to move and do the things you need to do. It breaks down your muscles to get the storage of sugar, the glutamine. It also increases your body fat if you don't use that sugar right away. And it breaks down your bones for calcium. So calcium can then go into the muscles and help them constrict and contract and do what they need to do. All this happens while the blood pressure is going up, while the heart rate is going up, while the breathing is going up, your eyes are dilating. You're basically putting your blood flow all towards musculature and the parts of your body that are going to help you do something in the immediate time. So this is the opposite of the rest and digest, the parasympathetic that is ideal for healing. And then ideally what happens is the body reports back to the brain like, hey, we're good. You can shut things down now. But as we've talked about, that's not what always happens. So when we have a chronic stress, again, these are all things that the body is doing to help us. It's not that the body's turned on us. I know sometimes it feels like that, but the body isn't always the smartest when it's lower brain. It's just about survival. So the body, if you have a chronic stress, if you're chronically in, dealing with a chronic illness or a loved one with a chronic illness, or you are in a job that isn't fulfilling, and if you're dealing with stressful relationships, whatever it may be. It could just be living in this industrialized world. Um, Basically, your body thinks, lower brain, that it can't get to its food source. So it continues to help you in a way that it thinks is helpful. So it thinks it's helping you by making it so that you can survive without a food source, because in the body's way of being, it's all about eating, sleeping, pooping. Like, it's not, the rest of it is kind of upper brain, and that's what makes us amazing humans. So the when it thinks it's not getting a food source, it's going to reduce thyroid function. So those of us like myself who have low thyroid, this plays a part. This is, we always have the genetic predisposition of things, but then epigenetics, what the environment is influencing us, and our own interactions with our environment are going to turn on and off these genes. So if you are already predisposed to like a hypothyroid or a thyroid difference, having this chronic stress might be what puts you over the edge. So basically, thyroid function is reduced. So what does that mean? That means that you're going to start gaining weight, going to start not digesting quickly, going to have like the constipation and the dry skin and the exhaustion. And this is all to conserve energy in the body's way of being. It's going to reduce antibody production. Again, like we mentioned, if you have a chronic illness like an asthma, a chronic joint inflammation, other kind of inflammatory processes, in modern medicine and westernized medicine, they sometimes will use a steroid to decrease that inflammation, like maybe inject a specific joint with a steroid, or give it to you orally if you have an asthma inflammation or some other type of inflammation. This is also true in the body. So when cortisol, these stress hormones, are increased, it reduces antibody production because, again, it's putting its energy towards the immediate. It's not thinking long term. But the problem with that is that it really does predispose you to developing a chronic condition, or having a chronic infection, or having a more severe infection than maybe you would had you been resting and digesting when you were exposed. And then, of course, this also affects our gut immunity. We haven't gone into this as much during this 3 days, although this is a topic that is pretty exciting and has a lot of research. But basically, the gut has its own immune system. It has its own barrier between it and the outside. And if that barrier of microbiome, of white blood cells, of film that kind of keeps you protected is not as efficient, because immunity is decreased, because digestion is affected, and that affects the microbiome, then basically you're going to be exposed to things from the outside, and that can lead to more inflammation. We'll get into that. So cortisol, as I mentioned before, is the stress hormone. It increases sugar and fat. It really is about the rescue mode. It works with adrenaline, that norepinephrine, epinephrine. It is anti-inflammatory, so it decreases inflammation. So it can be used in a positive way. It's also something that wakes us up in the morning. So again, like, cortisol is not all bad. It's just when it goes to this extreme. It also directs the immune system, directs other hormones. DHEA and cortisol are both made or broken down from cholesterol molecules. So that's the good fat that we will need in our body. If you are making a lot of cortisol, the thought is DHEA, that precursor to your sex hormones, that precursor to anti-stress, anti-aging calming, is not as available. Like, one is being made, the other is not being made. It's really a balance. The body is always trying to stay in a homeostasis. This is a big reason why when you start a medicine, your body responds to it. And it responds to it in the way that is predicted by pharmaceutical industry research, but also in ways that aren't talked about, which is changing the number of receptors and making it really difficult then to get off medication. So there's always a balance. There's always one is high, the other is low. This is one example of the balance in the body that is specific to what we're talking about in this moment. But this homeostasis, this ability to stay in a homeostasis is a universal theme within our bodies. So adaptogens, again, we'll get more into this later today in the VIP talk, but they interact with that hypothalamic, that pituitary, that adrenal, that axis, the picture that I showed you a little while ago, where the brain is talking to the adrenal glands over the kidneys, and then they are sending a signal back once the body is like responded. So when we're in that chronic stress, that body getting the signal back to the brain gets offline a bit. It doesn't respond to the signals. So it's not so much that you're not making the hormones, it's just that your body's not seeing them. It's almost like a diabetes kind of picture. It's not diabetes, but it's just like a similar way of being. And so adaptogens will actually affect hormone production and physiological responses to stress so that your body can go back to normally responding to stress. This is why folks who come see me favor adaptogens over traditional medications, because adaptogens will still let you cry to that Hallmark movie and have responses to your environment that, feel normal and feel good and feel okay. Positive and negative responses, but then turns down the volume from an 11 of stress down to a 5. So you're able to still respond to stressors and not be a zombie, but in an appropriate way, and then return to baseline of not having that chronic stress. So by doing that, they're reducing inflammation, reducing oxidative stress. So they're helping not just the brain, but really all of the different organs within the body. So the way adaptogens work, when you're in a chronic stress state, you start your adaptogen, you start your ashwagandha, your holy basil, your ginseng, your schisandra, whatever, particular one you and I, or you and your integrative medicine or naturopathic person helps identify as being most aligned with your body and your needs in that moment. Start this adaptogen. It takes about 6 weeks for it to start taking effect because it is on a cellular level. We generally recommend to stay on them for about 3 months. There is schools of thought, and I've been taught by those schools of thought that in this industrialized world where we're chronically stressed, you should probably be on some type of adaptogen all the time. I tend to be more in that line of thinking because adaptogens are so gentle on the body. They're pretty easy to kind of switch out. But what they do is they act on a cellular level. So they go to a protein. I have it here because I'm not going to remember it, the FKBP5, which basically is a protein that turns off an enzyme that makes it so that you then have the receptors back to see that feedback loop. So you're basically able to then respond to cortisol getting high. That's what those are fancy words for. Basically, it turns on a protein. So your brain says, oh, wait, cortisol is high. Oops, I'm supposed to turn this stuff down. The feedback loop is back online. I need to turn down this chronic stress response. And so what does that mean? It helps normalize your blood sugar. It helps decrease that sympathetic, that fight or flight tone, that feeling on edge and anxious and unable to sleep if you're in that immediate stress response. If you're more chronically stressed to the point of pooping out, that depressive, that low energy, that apathetic, that lack of motivation. Again, these are different types of adaptogens that work in different areas, in different stages of chronic stress, which is why I like just taking something that you find in Walgreens, which isn't a good resource, isn't going to do it. You really need someone who actually knows what the different adaptogens do in the body and how they interact with any medicines you may be on to do this in a correct way. So if you think you've tried an adaptogen and it didn't work, in all likelihood, it wasn't good quality, or you maybe weren't using it in a way that your body needed at the time. So again, yeah, it lowers that sympathetic tone. It decreases the body fat deposits. So it makes it easier to maybe attack that weight gain that you had during the chronic stress state. And then it lowers that need for calcium so that absorption of calcium from the bones. So basically it just helps balance everything. An adaptogen no pill is going to just fix everything. This is in alignment along with all the other things that we're going to talk about today. But this is one step that you can take to kind of get you in a better stage. And again, I do recommend doing this like under the guidance of someone who actually knows what they're doing. Okay. So traumatic brain injury is something that I have a special interest in, and so some of these slides are specifically about that, but with the caveat that it doesn't have to be that you're one of my veterans that, it was in a Humvee that hit an IED and like turned over and you were out for days. Like it doesn't have to be that level of brain injury and inflammation. For those of us with chronic illness, or an exposure to like a long COVID or an exposure to a thyroid issue or a lupus or inflammation in general, there is inflammation that happens at the blood-brain barrier. It's being thought more and more that inflammation of the blood-brain barrier is what's underlying for depression, anxiety, bipolar, attention deficit. These are all things that also are influenced by brain inflammation. So this is really applicable to everybody. So when we have any kind of injury with the brain, it itself is going to increase the risk of suicide. Just as I said, the inflammation itself is a risk factor for depression, for anxiety, for all the things. And unfortunately, that's increasing the risk of dying by suicide twofold. For TBI survivors in one study in 2016, it was 3 times the likelihood of dying from suicide versus those who had not had a traumatic brain injury. So this is due to, as I was kind of alluding to, the inflammation is what we're thinking. The cytokines are proteins that are produced in an inflammatory response. They are activated to break down whatever type of injury that you have and to help heal it. But unfortunately, they can go awry and start breaking down things like tryptophan and serotonin. Tryptophan is the precursor of serotonin and the norepinephrine and the different neurotransmitters. Again, we'll get into that a little later today. Serotonin is one of the neurotransmitters thought to be helpful for depression, for anxiety, for kind of calming the brain, also found in the gut. So low serotonin is connected to a depressed state. And so when inflammation is kind of playing this dirty deed on breaking down the precursors for neurotransmitters along with the neurotransmitters themselves, you're more likely to develop a depression and anxiety mood disorder. It also affects sleep. So we've seen that sleep duration and insomnia and the cytokine, these inflammatory proteins, all are associated with suicidality. So the thought is that inflammation is also playing a part in that it is also contributing to not only the insomnia, but the association of that insomnia along with the suicidality, likelihood to die by suicide. An 8-year study looked at suicide risk, and the group with the highest amount of inflammation had over 4 times the amount of risk for dying by suicide. Again, when these studies were done, they were kind of thinking traumatic brain injury, but as we've learned more, we've realized other processes are causing inflammation in the brain, whether it be a long-term virus, whether it be an autoimmune disease, whether it be a mood disorder itself. Like all of these things have an inflammatory element that we're still exploring and learning about. So addressing the inflammation in your body is only going to be helpful when you're trying to decrease death by suicide, but also decrease the symptoms themselves that are causing pain and difficulties for you, psychological and physical pain. So one way that we can address inflammation is vitamin D. Anyone who sees me knows I'm a big fan of checking vitamin D. I like folks' levels to be higher than it says on traditional labs because of the association of vitamin D with decreasing inflammation and decreasing the development of autoimmunity. So in looking at active military again, vitamin D below 15, that's like way low, 50% more likely to die by suicide. So, and I guarantee you there's someone watching this right now who has a vitamin D level that low, because our vitamin D, people say, oh, I just need more sun. Vitamin D, yes, it is absorbed from exposure in the sun. If you're naked on the equator, you're not going to get it if you're living up in New York and you're like that far from the equator and like outside for 20 minutes. That's not going to get you enough vitamin D. Your gut does absorb it some, but not to the level that generally is beneficial. So when you're dealing with a depression, a suicide, an inflammatory process, I'm sorry, not suicide, a depression, anxiety, an inflammatory process, it's worth checking to see what your vitamin D levels are and then supplementing in kind. I generally recommend checking them because there's different levels and dosages that we recommend, and there's you need to take it with food, you need to take it in a certain type of way. I'm not a big fan of just like, I'm going to go to the grocery store and get all these things and just take them and, hope for the best. So I do recommend kind of aligning with your provider when looking at these things so you can make sure you're doing it in a healthy way. So when we looked at vitamin D and suicide attempters versus those who are just depressed without suicidality, and then controls, those who attempted suicide, over half of those were vitamin D deficient compared to the other groups. Also, low vitamin D is associated with those pro-inflammatory cytokines, those proteins that are used to break down products when you have inflammation that can turn awry and kind of break down things that we need in our body. So all that's to say that inflammation is implicated in the pathophysiology of depression, of developing suicidal tendencies, and we already know it's already associated with autoimmunity, with long-term COVID, with injury, with viral illnesses, with cancer, with all the things that people in this 3-day group together are dealing with. So cholesterol, when, my esteemed colleagues in cardiology love to lower cholesterol, and I'm here for it, but you have to be aware that the brain is 60% fat. So when it's the most cholesterol rich organ, it's also the organ that we need to keep healthy, to keep our thinking straight, to keep us from developing thoughts of hurting ourselves, to keep us from having low mood and anxiety and all the things. So about 15% of cholesterol used by the body comes from the diet. And we have realized that if cholesterol is low, suicidality is unfortunately more likely to be in play. So there have been studies looking at folks who attempt suicide, and they tend to have a lower cholesterol level. Those who have more violent attempts are actually even more likely to have a lower cholesterol level. And again, cholesterol is something that we want, there's different types of cholesterol. So the LDL, the like kind of bad cholesterol, we do want to monitor that and lower that for our heart health and for stroke health and what have you. But we have to be aware that we don't over lower it, and that we make the positive, the good fats more available in our body so that we are keeping our brains healthy. So one way of doing that is omega-3. Omega-3 is kind of one of the good fats. Our diets tend to have a lot of omega-6, which is kind of not so good fats. And so we're trying to balance those two things. So that's why you don't generally see people having like omega-6 supplements, because our diets have enough of that. We're trying to like change that ratio a bit by increasing the omega-3. So when we looked at folks who, a lot of this stuff is VA, because VA has a lot of good research just because they have access to everybody's data, and it's easy way to just kind of pull data without having to like interview a bunch of people. So when they looked at 800 service personnel who completed suicide over about 6 years, 80% of those had not actually been in combat. So they'd not actually been deployed, had that level of trauma that that was apparent in uh, their service charts. Um, but so they kind of wondered, like, why is this? Why are people who are maybe not having trauma that we thought was like the main indication for suicidality, like what else is going on? So they realized that those with low DHA, which is that positive omega-3 type fat, are more likely to die of suicide. So this is something that's important to note. This is why when folks come see me, if they're not living here in New Orleans and eating all the healthy Louisiana seafood all the time, like if you're a fisherman on the bayou, awesome. Like your diet's probably amazing for keeping your healthy fats good in your brain. But if you're not eating a lot of seafood, or not at the levels that are recommended, omega-3 is the next best thing. So it's using omega-3 is going to lower death by suicide, lower depression, lower suicidality. And having the flip side of that is true. So low omega-3 available in the body, unfortunately, increase the risks of all these things, increase the likelihood of dying by suicide, increase the likelihood of having a depression, and increase the suicidal ideations that are present. So when we look at different supplements, like I said, the temptation is to go and just buy whatever you can find because maybe you just don't have the access to see someone like myself right now, or it's just, isn't in alignment with what you're doing. You want to try doing, DIY first. So awesome. If you're in our community, you should have received a handout about supplement safety. If not, please let us know because this is something we can email to you quite easily. But one of the things or some of the things to be aware of if you are just buying your own supplements is that it needs to have the manufacturer contact information. A lot of these supplements that you are seeing advertised on Instagram that influencers are suddenly like saying are the best thing ever, are really just making your pee like really expensive. You shouldn't have to pay $100 for a supplement ever. Like nothing is going to be worth that amount of money. So if it doesn't have a contact information like phone number, address for the manufacturer, that's a big tell that it's probably not a good quality product and there's something to hide. If they contain a long list of other ingredients, like not like this plant, this part of the plant, this number with the plant, but instead has a blend of adaptogens or a blend of X, Y, and Z without even specifically saying what the blend is, I would not recommend that product. If it doesn't have a manufacturing date or an expiration date, these things do have shelf lives. They're not something that 10 years later are going to have the same quality. They're actually ones that are good quality are testing them, from like on shelf life, like versus where when it's stored in a certain type of way, like going through a truck, in 100-degree weather and being on the shelf, like, is it still the same quality? These are things that need to be on the label. If it claims to cure something, it's bullshit. Like nothing is going to make you magically lose weight. Sorry. Nothing is going to make you magically act like you're 20 in the bedroom. And nothing is going to cure your illness, like one pill. Like that's just not how it works. They're not allowed to claim those things, like by the FDA. If it's claiming something and actually has evidence to be claiming something, then it's a medical food. And that's different. That's something I prescribe to you. There are medical foods that are indicated for things like TBI, Alzheimer's, depression, anxiety. These are actually monitored by the FDA and have good evidence for them and aren't the pharmaceuticals. They are kind of a higher level of supplement of vitamins, of supplements, but they are monitored quite well by the FDA and are allowed to have an indication, allowed to say they do these things because they have the evidence proving they do. So basically, if it sounds too good to be true, I'm sorry, my love, it is. Folks will come to me and with this list of things, and it's just really expensive pee. And sometimes people get really attached to things and they don't want to stop them. And I'll make a recommendation of a medical grade product. And they were like, oh, but I got it from this website my best friend, is selling from. And they think they're getting the same product. It's not. There's a reason that those of us who are kind of in the integrative medicine space or board qualified and what have you, use sites that have medical grade products, because we know that they are being tested. They have the peer review quality. They have the GMO, proof. They have all the evaluations that are happening to show that they're good products. I study with a naturopathic doc as part of my fellowship with Andy Weil, and one of her previous life positions was going into different supplement companies and evaluating the quality of their products. So, she shared lists of products that are good quality with me. I've shared those with you guys as much as I can. So we know there are companies that are doing good quality work and are evaluating the level of their shelf life, the types of plants and types of vitamins, and the specific science behind things. These are important to pay attention to. Like I said, if it's too good to be true or sounds too good to be true, it is. Just because, your favorite Instagram person got paid, $20,000 to say something about whatever, coffee or supplement, doesn't mean that it's worth anything. It just means it lined their pockets. Yeah, I'm trying to think. So, another thing that I kind of tell people is, if you're looking at like adaptogens as a specific example, and again, I can get more into this a little later, but there are specific studies done on plants and on different, what I recommend to people. I'm always recommending things based on evidence. That's part of what integrative medicine is that it's evidence-based. It's not just stuff I'm kind of pulling out of the sky. So when I recommend something, a specific type of adaptogen or a specific type of vitamin, it's based on a study that says this type of plant this part of the plant, this element of the plant. And when they get that specific, they start having like, LS 1295, like they have a specific numbering system and specific area that they are putting in their label. Like strong supplements have this kind of stuff in their labels. And, kind of with that, there's a lot of like bodybuilding influencers and people like that who are like, oh, there's all these studies. Their studies are their own, like they are made up studies. They're not like peer reviewed quality published studies. What I'm talking about are ones that are peer reviewed quality published studies, not ones that like this supplement store or supplement maker just kind of made up themselves. And just, like if the publisher is the person who's selling the product, that's like one of the first things we learn in medical school. Like that's not good research. So I'll just share that with you because I know not everybody knows that. And it's important to know that so you can be an informed consumer and make good choices and not waste your money on things that are either going to just make you have expensive urine or possibly harm you, because it might have things from China or other areas of the world that are harmful, because unfortunately some of these things do. There's always something that comes out about this random product has lead in it or something like that can really hurt you, or has things that aren't identified, like these blends. This is part of why these are dangerous. If you're on a blood thinner or on any type of, certain types of like heart medicines, or, thyroid medicines and different things in that blend could be dangerous for you, could make your medications not work well, could interact with your medications in a way that could kill you. So you have to be careful. You have to, if you're not able to see someone like myself, talk to your pharmacist minimum. But you have to be careful with these blends and with these things that aren't well documented, because they just aren't really worth the money. Sorry for that little getting off the soapbox now, but I care about you guys. I want you guys to live long and healthy lives. I don't want you to be taken advantage of by people who claim to be, claim to be integrative, but are really just, jumping on the bandwagon to make a quick buck. Okay. So diet. So brain health. So there is a type of diet, the mind diet, which has been found to be great for delaying neurodegeneration. So folks who may be predisposed to dementia, or brain concerns that can be due to a traumatic brain injury, due to a chronic inflammation, due to just maybe you just want to make sure you have a healthy brain life, and maybe you have a family history, maybe you don't, but maybe that's a concern of yours. So the Med Dash diet is the mind diet. So it's basically a combination of the Mediterranean diet, which is the anti-inflammatory diet that I'm always telling y'all to follow and sending you information about if you see me one-on-one, and working with my nutritionist, integrative nutritionist, to help you learn. And then the DASH diet itself is a diet specifically for decreasing hypertension, so like lowering sodium and like keeping your blood pressure in check. It's plant-based, primarily for dementia prevention. It's a lot about high use of vegetables. Berries are really good anti-inflammatory. We use those a lot for like breast cancer prevention and survival, also for dementia and brain health. Whole grains, same, also like super good for brain health. Poultry and fish are the types of protein, if you're a meat eater, that I would recommend. You have to be very careful when you're cooking your meat. And, I live here in New Orleans. I'm surrounded by meat eaters, including my husband. Be careful of your cooking points. Like if you cook meat too high, it creates a compound that's actually toxic. So that's why we recommend using things like the Evo is the extra virgin olive oil, has that lower kind of heating point or ability to like heat without causing these, I might be using the wrong terms because I'm not a cook, but the ability to not change the compound into something toxic. Nuts and beans are always going to be good for you if that's something that's in alignment with your gut health and with how you are. And if you are an alcohol drinker, red wine is something to consider. If you're someone like myself who has like mast cell concerns, red wine might not be the best fit for you. So you just have to be aware, this is something that is a generalized recommendation, but depending on what your chronic concerns are, I always recommend a good nutritionist. Like I said, I work closely with some integrative nutritionists here locally, and then I know some internationally that I like to refer folks to as well. So when in doubt, that's always a good visit to include. The mind diet increases polyphenols and antioxidants and fatty acids. These are all like polyphenols are, parts of like the plants and the berries and what have you. Antioxidants are, we've already mentioned, in fatty acids. Those are, in the fish and the nuts and all these things that I kind of mentioned above. These combinations increase what we call BDNF, which we'll talk a little bit about today. It's the brain-derived neurotropic factor. So this is the yummy, awesome, I don't want to say substance, but it's made by your brain when you're like doing certain activities. And that in turn lowers brain inflammation. It increases neuroplasticity, so the ability of the brain to make new connections and heal itself and form new ways of being. And, if you have a brain injury, that's super important because that helps you kind of regrow different ways of the brain working. So if we've seen like folks who maybe lose one part of their brain, another part of their brain will take over for different functioning. We've seen that actually happen in real time, which is super cool. So BDNF is something that plays a part in that. And then it also increases sensitivity to insulin, which is good for those of us who are predisposed to like a diabetes type 2 or something where your body isn't seeing the insulin and responding to it in a way that it needs to. That's also important to note because we think that something like an Alzheimer's is like a diabetes type 3, like it's something that insulin is playing a part in as well, or lack of response to insulin. So increasing that sensitivity, that ability of your body to use the sugar that's in the blood in an appropriate way is important for multiple ways of being, in decreasing inflammation, decreasing chances of developing all the side effects of diabetes, and also decreasing the chance of developing dementia. So another thing we can do, and again, this is something that you can just walk outside and there it is the circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm, that is our body's response to our environment, to light source energy, to sunlight specifically, although artificial light can sometimes be negative in its effects with this. So basically the sun will enter through your eyes, through your retina, and there are certain cells. I actually met the guy this past weekend who discovered the cells, the blue light cells in your retina, and like brilliant. What? Like his whole way of being and passion is looking at circadian rhythm. So it's pretty cool to learn from someone like that. But anyway, there's cells that he discovered, his team discovered, as he likes to say, in the retina that then tell a different part of your brain, like this is just kind of getting into the nitty gritty of the parts of the brain, that it's daylight outside. And so when it's daylight, that's telling your brain, I don't need to make as much melatonin right now because I'm supposed to be awake. This is when the cortisol is higher because it's like, hey, it's daylight, it's time to be awake. So then the pathways of the light going into the brain, into different parts of the brain, is telling it like, this is awake time. Later is when I need to be making melatonin, like start raising it slowly so it'll be higher later in the evening. So this has enormous benefits for the body and brain. When we talk about using circadian rhythm, I'll sometimes reference to folks who see me about circadian light if they're having difficulties with insomnia. Circadian light is the time between sunrise and about noon, and that's when it's most beneficial, if you can, to be outside for about 20 minutes. So your brain has this trigger of, hey, it's light outside. This is the sunlight telling me it's light outside, not artificial light. And I need to be awake right now. And I need to make my melatonin for later so I can sleep later. So having this exposure early in the day actually does help regulate your circadian rhythm and get you into a place where you can sleep better at night. So like I kind of started saying this, using timed exposure to light and darkness can really help you with using your circadian rhythm. It helps to maintain as much as you can. I know some folks who have like shift work and things like that, but as much as you can maintain a regular sleep-wake pattern, that's going to be most beneficial to you and your body. If you are inside, either because of weather or just because of safety or whatever, when it's dusk outside and unable to kind of be exposed to the actual physical, like lowering of the sun and dusk happening, if that's not, like kind of in your way of living, that you're able to be outside for that. You can simulate that by starting to turn on like lamps and turning off the overhead light and doing that a couple hours before bedtime. These are my readers, but like, for my kids, I have blue light blockers in our glasses. I wear contacts, but like at night, as soon as I get home, I put my glasses on and they have a blue light blocker in them. These are all the blue light. Like I said, there's specific cells in your retina that have been discovered that react to blue light, to that frequency of light that's similar to the sun's frequency. And when the brain sees that at like 11 p.m., it's thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be awake. And that's why you're not sleeping then until like 2 a.m, because you're looking at your iPad at 11. So this is why, if you're going to be, there's different settings in your smart technology where you can have it turn to night mode or dark mode, and you can do a timer in that. If you just look in the settings, there's a timer for dark mode. Some of the newer ones might actually just automatically do that. I'm not really sure, but that's something that you can adjust for yourself. If you don't know how to do it, get like a Gen Alpha or whatever they are, whatever the newest people are. My kid could do it, whoever they are, and they can help you with that. But that helps tune down that exposure. And again, you can kind of simulate that by turning down the lights in your place. If you are having difficulty with sleep implementation, setting the stage for sleep, it's okay to use a supplemental melatonin. I'll do that with my folks who have like a chronic stress or whose sleep is just really like offline. People have hesitancy around it, but it's preferable to use that versus like a hypnotic that's gonna make it so you don't forget what you're doing. And unfortunately, hypnotics and I think it's 20 doses of hypnotic lowers your lifespan by a couple of years. So it's not something that you want to take chronically. And then of course, trying to sleep in total darkness. My kiddo is really good at this. She wears one of those eye things. I think the pressure on her eyes also is helpful to her. But whatever you can do to kind of keep yourself, like don't, if you're waking up in the middle of the night, do your best not to be like looking at the clock. If you find that you're, not able to sleep, kind of getting up and moving a little bit before, until you're tired again and kind of keeping the bedroom a safe place. But that's all kind of in sleep maintenance. But the circadian rhythm itself is something that is there and available to us that we can use. And having that good sleep pattern is going to help your brain health. So exercise is another thing that's available to us to improve brain health. So exercise itself increases neuroplasticity. It is specifically increases neuroplasticity in the areas of the brain that shrink with age and shrink with dementia. So it actually increases neuroplasticity there and increases and expands volume in those areas. So exercise is something I'm always going to recommend. The general recommendation is 2 hours and 30 minutes a week of moderate exercise. So that can be walking, that can be swimming, that can be anything that, mowing the lawn, whatever is in alignment with you and your body. Obviously, if you're someone with chronic illness or Ehlers-Danlos or has that kind of rebound from exercise, then you need to modify this a bit and do what your body allows you to do. I myself have a walking pad if I'm not able to walk outside, and I'm just aware that like there's some days my body's more able to tolerate that than others, and I just work with my body. Like you listen to your body, that's always the best way to start. But some type of movement is better than none. I know myself, if I don't have any movement, I'm in a lot more pain. And this has been shown in science, like the studies show that this is true. If you have inflammation, if you have chronic joint pain due to a rheumatoid arthritis, due to a lupus, due to a Ehlers-Danlos, due to any of the above, a fibromyalgia, if you're not moving your body, the pain will be worse. And so you do have to balance like what your body can tolerate. I myself like, like a good Pilates because of the core strength helps strengthen around my hypermobile joints. That's if you're unsure, this is something you can talk about with your primary care doctor, or I love a good, like physical therapists are great for helping people figure out what works for them, what they can modify for them. I've mentioned Tai Chi is another thing that's pretty accessible to folks. It's something you can modify and do sitting if you need to. And, any movement is better than no movement. So as I kind of started to say, the brain effects with exercise, it improves your mood. So neurotransmitters are actually increased when you are exercising. I like to say, if you can, to exercise in the morning during circadian light outside, because then it's like a triple whammy. Like you get the 20 minutes of lowering cortisol and improving stress. You get the circadian light exposure of telling you like now's the time to be awake, later's when I sleep. And then you get these brain effects of exercise. So neurotransmitters are increased. So serotonin, norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, those are all increased with exercise. It also improves the memory and attention in that prefrontal cortex, hippocampus. Those are the areas again of the brain that are normally degenerated by age and dementia. And so it protects against those things. And then the long-term mood benefit, the BDNF, that brain-derived neurotropic factor, again, that's that nice stuff that I almost picture it like as a lovely bath in your brain that's like helping your brain be healthy and feel good. That's increased. That helps build more neuropathways. It helps build more positive neurotransmitters. It helps build expand areas of the brain that need healing, and then decreases that stress hormone, that cortisol. So these are all positive, amazing things you can do with any type of exercise. So again, meet your body where you're at and work with your healthcare team to increase your movement. You do not have to, and just a reminder, sometimes my folks forget this, like you don't have to do the same level of exercise or type of exercise you did when you were 20, because our bodies do change with time. I was a dancer through college, and I missed dance. So I went back to a different type of dance because I knew, like, if I did the type of dance I might, was my minor in college, like I'm going to have feelings about it because I'm not 20 anymore. But instead I did like a fun Latin cardio dance style that was new to me. So it like challenged my brain, but also got me moving and got me doing things I love. And since it was new to me, I didn't have the ego aspect of like, oh, this isn't how I used to be. Because I see people falling into that trap. Like if they're not doing the same level that they did when they were in college, then they give up. So, again, meet yourself where you're at and slowly increase. And that's going to guarantee better results and more likely to continue, which is going to improve your brain health. So another aspect of exercise that is super important is getting you into that optimum stress state. When we have too little stress, we get bored, we're sitting on the couch, we're kind of, there's only so much fun I can have, like watching my stories on TV before I'm like losing my mind. If I have too much stress, that orange zone, I'm exhausted. That's like when you overdo, if you're someone like me who has some exercise, pushback, sometimes intolerance if I overdo it. Like if I'm on my walking pad until my dysautonomia takes over and I'm browning out, like that's not good to me. Then I'm in that orange, or sometimes if I get dysautonomic, like that anxiety panic mode. So you have to kind of find where your happy place is, this optimum stress state. And what does that mean? So optimum stress is actually the flow state. So the flow state is something that exercise is a super good thing to get us into it, but also arts, music, dance, writing. There's so many baking, there's so cooking, there's so many ways to get into flow state. Here on the left is my husband, Todd, and my daughter, Maeve, back when Todd called Tulane games. Todd is a play-by-play announcer, and he gets into, he's also former athlete, so we exercise all the time, but he gets into flow state all the time. And it's protective. It's something that keeps you and your brain health in a good place. When you have a big stressor like a pandemic, if you have a way to have a flow state, it's protective of you from that stress and anxiety associated with that. So when he calls a game, he gets completely into flow state. When my daughter Maeve, who is a musical theater kid and a dancer, does a show, she is immediately in flow state. Like the time is, lost her. She recently did a musical, the weeks leading up to it. She's doing the rehearsal. She's having all the feelings, the anxieties. And then the curtain pulls and she's doing her songs. She's doing her acts, and it's almost like time stops. Like she's just completely immersed into the activity in front of her. The hour or two of the show goes by quickly. Any kind of nervous stomach or, oh, I need to go potty is completely forgotten. Your brain is completely absorbed in the activity that's in front of it. That is flow state. So it can be giving a talk. If it's something, when I do my TV segments, I get into flow. Like I lose track of time. That's why it's good someone's there keeping track of time, because I don't pay attention. But so basically, if you have a clear goal, if you're very focused and concentrated, if you don't have any kind of sense of self or like, oh my God, what do I look like? I can't believe it. Like if all that's kind of out the window, if you're getting that direct and immediate feedback of, oh, I'm making this work, this is going really well. If your skill level, this is the important part of flow, is matched to the challenge. So that's what this little diagram here down on the left bottom is. So skills is down here on the bottom and challenges up and down. So if your skills are higher than the challenges, you get bored. And that's, as we build skill, this is more likely to happen, right? But if the challenge is higher than your skill set, you're just going to be anxious and you're going to like have fight or flight or freeze. And that's no good either. So it's really about meeting yourself in a way that the flow can occur, the challenge and the skill level are equally met. So as we build skill, we need to increase the challenge to continue in a flow state. So that's why something like performance, or like my husband doing his play-by-play, or the athletes on the floor doing their game, or doing a surgery if you're like a physician, or doing a procedure, or doing a piece of artwork, something where it's constantly changing and your need to continue to use your skill level at a high level is present, is going to keep you in a flow state. So it's intrinsically rewarding. It's total absorption. It's you lose track of time. It's a pretty groovy place to be. The cool thing about flow also is that flow gets you into a brainwave pattern that is very similar to meditation. So I saw this in real time when I was working with a group of folks in a group medical appointment, and we would always do a mindfulness exercise at the start. And a gentleman said, "Hey doc, how come every time we do this mindfulness, I keep thinking about when I was a kid playing the saxophone?" I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." Because when he was playing the saxophone as a kid here in New Orleans, his brain was getting into flow state. And this meditation was flirting with that same flow state. And his brain was probably telling him, like, dude, let's get back into flow. Let's go pick up that saxophone. And he ended up doing that, which was amazing. So flow is a nice way of getting the same healthy, positive uh, aspects of meditation, of mind body work that we were talking about on the first day, in a way that might be more accessible to people. If you hear meditation and think, well, that's Buddha on the mountaintop, that's not me. I guarantee you have something that'll help you in a flow state, whether it be your artwork, whether it be your baking, whether it be your job, if it's something that you love, whether it be helping your kid with their homework, if it's like a subject that you actually really enjoy, whatever. It could be a crossword puzzle. Games are a great way to get into flow state. Like, we talk a lot about, the positive and negative aspects of video gaming. Video gaming is actually a great way to get into flow state. So if it's something that, it's a nice way for kids to wind down and get into flow, maybe between homework sessions, or, what have you, as long, you have to monitor things, keep it in realistic time period, maybe just a time of 20 minutes or an hour or whatever works for your family. But it is a really good flow state. So it's not something that you want to, consider that if you're worried about it. It actually has some positive aspects. And we use games for things like PTSD and stuff like that as well, partly because of this. Yeah, so that's flow. Like I said, I'm a big fan of flow. I could get into flow talking about flow all the time. All right. And of course, there's the mindfulness practices that we've already touched on and kind of dug into and sampled as we've gone along these 3 days. These are all ways that are going to be healthy for your brain. And I'm just going to close with, as you guys know, one of my favorites, the 4-7-8. So I'll invite you. I'll get my little handy dandy bell so we can do this together. Again, I'll count us. I'm not going to count it this time. I'm just going to give the voice triggers. And if for some reason your breathing pattern is faster or slower than mine, that's okay. The main thing about 4-7-8 breathing is that the inhale is half the amount of the exhale. You want to exhale for twice as long. That triggers that vagus nerve, which is a big facilitator of the parasympathetic relaxation response. So breathing for twice as long as, or exhaling for twice as long as inhale, is going to really help trigger that parasympathetic relaxation response and just help your brain. And again, this is something you can do every day and in whatever environment. It's not something that people are going to pay attention to. You don't even have to close your eyes if you don't want to, if you're just having a moment. But let's do this together. All right. I invite you to just sit comfortably with an awake spine. And if you want to close your eyes, you can. If just holding a soft gaze or just looking at the image there serves you more, that's okay too. Let's just do a couple of regular inhales first. Inhaling and exhale, and inhale and exhale. We'll start the 4-7-8. And inhale hold, and exhale. And inhale, hold, and exhale. And inhale, hold, and exhale. And one last time, if it serves you, inhale, hold, and exhale. When you're ready, just bringing your breathing back to what's comfortable. Just noticing it, noticing your body in this space and this time after this brief exercise. How your brain is thanking you for this ability to be in this moment. When you're ready, you can open your eyes if your eyes are closed. And again, I'm here to serve you. I appreciate your time as always. Your energy uh, gives me strength in ways that I can't even explain. Obviously, y'all can find me where we're at right now, but you can also find me in my websites, hollymckennamd.com. If you are thinking like, hey, I would love for her to come speak about X, Y, and Z, that's a great place to book that. If you're thinking more of working with me one-on-one, thedarwellnessnola.com. And then, of course, I'm on Insight Timer, Instagram, all the places. So thank you guys so much for your time and energy. And VIPs, I'll see you in a little bit, and then we'll have closing ceremony. I love you guys. Have a great day.